So there was this guy, and here's God. We don't actually know what God's face looks like. I've heard people that have had stories of dying and coming back, and they got to see, because it says, he said, no one can look on my face and live. Well, these people had died, and they saw the face of God, and you know what they say it looks like? He said, ever shifting, looking like so many different people in the world, because we're made in his image. So it's like, his face is like, we resemble him. Like, he looks like Eulalia, he looks like Jared, he looks like Adair, he looks like Hunter, he looks like Logan, he looks like me. So just the face of God, but he's so beautiful and full of glory. But because we don't know exactly what he looks like, and he's super, super bright, we just got this for God. So here's God, and his glory is all on the earth, all in the garden. He had made all this stuff. Raise your hand if you were here last week. Were you here last week?
Yeah, I was here.
Did they teach about how he created the animals? Okay.
Yeah.
You remember?
And created everything.
You don't remember? Okay, well, God created everything, and basically he made another one that could communicate with him, because he didn't just want animals. He wanted to make another being that was, because we're not animals, we're in the class of God, we're a completely different creation. And he made it so that when Adam spoke, that things would happen. And so he actually gave Adam the job of taking care of his creation, the plants and the animals. He made Adam the God of this world. You and I are his grandchildren. A long time ago, all of us have come from Adam and Eve. And so we have the ability to speak like God speaks and create things. And so whenever Adam would name an animal, they would take on a characteristic, and that's how they would act. Is he would say, I think that this is how I imagine that animal acting. And then they would become animated, and they would start acting like that. He would name each one and give it a characteristic. And so God created Adam in his image, in his likeness, to be just like him. And we know that God is three parts, like how an egg has a shell. It has the white yolk part, or the white part, and then the yellow yolk, but it's all the egg. God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but all one. It's hard for us to understand because we live in a different dimension where we think, is this three separate people? Yes and no. It's all God, kind of like we're all in a family. Gordon, Eulalia, Jeremy, Sandra, they're all a family, but they're all different parts of the family, okay? And so that's how God is. God is one, but he's three in one.
Don't forget my sister, Victoria.
And Victoria. I didn't know Victoria was your sister. Adair?
Got it.
And I also have another sister named Abigail.
Okay.
But she's rude to me because she tells me what to do.
Well, we gotta forgive her. But anyways, God is three in one. So it says in the verse that I read this morning about it, it says, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. And so whenever he created Adam, he formed him from the dust of the earth, and then he breathed life into him. It says through his nostrils, actually. So we have a laying down one of Adam too, which I'll get into that. But Adam went through and named all the animals. And after, it could have been like, our concept of time could have been night and day. I don't know how long it took him to do that. But after he went through the process of naming billions of species and subspecies and remembering and maintaining all that information, every bug, every bird, every fish, like God must have taken him into the body of water, the ocean, too. Because back then we speculate, which means we don't know for sure, but we think that the whole earth was one big piece of planet called Pangea. And so he must have taken him to the water to name all the fish, because he named every animal and he knew everything. And so he said, you know what? My creation doesn't have an animal just like itself. All these animals have other animals like themselves to have babies. And so he's like, I'm gonna make him go to sleep like this. God put Adam into a deep sleep. And he said, I'm going to take out of his side, near his heart and not near his side, and I'm going to create another creature just like him. So I'm going to take out pieces of this one guy and make two separate ones, but they're going to be together and they're going to be happy. And so he made him go to sleep, and when he woke up, this is what he found. He was like, whoa, that was a nap. I just had a long nap. Whoa, I named all the animals and I know all of the animals. Who's this? He said, finally, one that was taken from my bones, one that's like me. He said he's looking around and he sees all these other fish and all these other creatures that have another one like them, a mommy and a daddy. And he said, oh, one like me. And so he named her Woman because he had a womb. You know how women have babies? He had parts of him was taken out. God took it out and sculpted her. So she was refined, beautiful. And he made her for Adam. Adam and Eve were made for God to be companions and friends, to be the gods of this world, the God of this world. He put us over it. And then he made Eve, and together they were to rule over all the animals in the whole world.
Wasn't he like so impressed with how she looked? He was like, whoa, man.
Whoa, man.
Like that's where
Maybe.
She's pretty.
whoa, man.
She's pretty, that's right. Yeah, so they were actually, they didn't have trees all around us like this, because this is how the artists drew this, because they wanted to cover their private parts. But back then, because they would be with God. I read it in the Passion Translation this morning with all these footnotes. It told you what the Hebrew words were. God's presence, it was almost like, has anyone ever seen fog? Have you ever seen fog in the mornings?
Oh yeah.
Whenever the light hits it, it was like that, but even more beautiful. His presence was like all around in the cool of the day. He would come and he would commune with them and talk with them, and they were just surrounded by God's glory. So they didn't even like feel embarrassed or anything. They didn't have trees like following them everywhere they walked. You know, they were just like, they were naked and unashamed, it says. They didn't have any clothes. But you know what happened? There was actually one tree, because God made Adam and Eve the gods of this world, the God of this world. And so to remind Adam and Eve that they weren't God, he said, you're made in my image, but you're not me. I need you to listen. There's this one tree. You can have anything else in the whole world, anything else in the garden you can eat, but I want you to realize that I have your best interests in mind. So there's going to be one thing, and that's like the tithe we were talking about earlier. I need you to acknowledge that I'm God, not you. I created this world. And so he would come down and God would eat of this fruit, but they were not allowed to eat of it. And they had to obey. Everyone say obey.
Obey.
There's actually a blessing in obeying. A lot of the world, now the God of this world is Satan, because we listened to him and obeyed him. But whoever you obey, that is who we surrender the power to. And so basically, he's all about rebellion, and he has infiltrated the entire world to think if you do your own selfish motive, that you're going to be more free. But when you do it, you actually come under his dominion, and it makes it so that whatever his plans and his purposes are of rebellion, not obeying, it will put you into more bondage. Like the further you go, the darker it gets. And so there was so many beautiful creatures. They didn't see a snake or a spider or what's another scary creature, maybe a rat, as being bad. Oh, they didn't see any bad creatures in the whole world. Just a second. And so it wasn't weird to Eve. She was walking around just doing what God had told her. La la la. And it could have been, who knows, you guys, it could have been thousands of years. They obeyed up until that point. But he planted an idea in her mind. And she had everything in the world. She didn't need this. But he said, you know what? God knows something that you don't know. And he's holding out on you.
So they can talk to animals?
I don't know how it was, but obviously it wasn't weird for her. She wasn't like, why is the snake talking to me? So it's possible that the animal spoke. Maybe it was like, there's parts of our brain we no longer use. There's huge parts of our brain that are not totally active. So maybe he was just talking to her through thought, like telepathically. Who knows? We don't know.
Interesting.
But he spoke to her. He communicated to her. And he said, is it true that you shouldn't eat of every tree in the garden? So he twists words. That's how the deceiver is. Is it true that God was not there. Even though God is everywhere. But he he wanted to give them a choice. Everyone say, I have a choice.
I have a choice.
It's my choice.
My choice.
Exactly. So God gave all of us a choice. And he wants us to be able, that is one thing God will never take from you, is your choice. But all of our choices have what happens after our choice. So you're either going to choose what God said, there's only two choices, or you can choose deception, what the deceiver, the shining one, is offering you. Which in her case, he was saying, is it true that you can't eat every tree? Like, he's like, come on, why can't you eat every tree? There's only one tree, which is the one that he was in, that she couldn't eat. God told Adam, don't eat of this tree. And so whenever Eve was created, Adam communicated to her, don't eat it, don't even touch it. But that's not what God said. So we need to be really careful to do exactly what was the words verbatim. That means word for word. What exactly did God say? We always need to go back. What exactly did God say? Because if we don't know exactly what he said, we could get lost. She's like, we can eat any tree except for this tree right here. We can't even touch it. And he said, okay, why don't you touch it then? See what happens. He said, you won't surely die. He said, God knows that when you reach out and take of this fruit, which we don't actually know, people think it's an apple a lot of times, but I like this illustration. It almost looks like a little pumpkin because we don't know what the fruit was back then. And so she took of the fruit, she touched it.
I think it's orange.
And nothing bad happened. She doesn't even know bad. She has no concept of being sad, no concept of pain. And so she doesn't even know like what God is holding out on her. All she knows is that this creature just communicated to her that the one that created everything, he has knowledge of something that she doesn't know. And she wants to know everything.
First mistake. Serpent said God's a liar. God said you're going to die. Serpent said God's a liar. He said you won't die. For God knows in that day that if you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing the difference between good and evil. So
she was curious. And she was like, what's evil? Why don't I know what evil is? I want to know. And then it said she looked at the tree. This could have happened. Maybe he talked to her and she said no and walked away. And it could have been sunrise, sunset for years and years. Who knows how long it was? But he planted that thought in her mind. And one day she reached out and touched it. That was the first step. She reached out and touched it and was like, what's die? Everything's the same. I don't think I died. Did I die? Everything feels the same. And so she ate it. She bit into it. And because it said she looked at it and she saw that it was a beautiful fruit and it would make her wise. It would make her know the difference to be like God between good and evil. And she doesn't know what evil is, but she wants to know. She reaches out and touches it and nothing happens. And so she decides to eat it. Guess what? Her and Adam were always together. They love each other, they're best friends. And so they would walk through this beautiful garden and they would be, it was their job to work. I don't know what kind of work they had because there were no thorns. Everything was beautiful, but they had certain tasks that they did. So they were together. And so I don't know if Adam was there when the snake spoke to Eve, but whenever she reached out and touched it and she ate it, it says she gave some to Adam. She gave some to him. And he knew about what God said, you shall surely die. And so he was like, he knew that she already ate some and he loves her so much. I mean, he was not deceived, but she was, and he decided to eat it too. We don't know why he did that, but he decided to eat it. I think that he loved Eve so much, he didn't want her to die, and he wanted to go through whatever she went through. And so he decided to eat it. And then right when they ate it, they were embarrassed. He's like, what's happening? And she was like, I don't know, because they don't know anything bad up until this point. And so all this stuff is happening. We'll leave him there because God's going to talk to him. And so they get embarrassed and he's like, Eve, and the glory of God leaves.
Wow.
And so all of a sudden they feel dark inside. They feel sad. They've never felt sadness or pain before. And they look at their bodies. They don't have the glory of God on them. And so they feel they feel afraid. They feel naked and ashamed. And you know what they did? This is actually a sprout, a small version of a fig tree. This is a small fig tree, not a big one. But this is a decoration in the lobby. I took it. This is real. They took a fig leaves that look like this. They may have been bigger in that environment.
Probably.
And they made clothing for themselves. So they probably didn't know what private parts were. So they probably made some like big blanket to wrap themselves in. Because they covered their bodies because the glory was covering them before. And so they don't know what parts of themselves to cover. And so they were just covering themselves. But this is what this artist made it. This is how they made their clothing in their midsection here. And so God comes. We'll just put him in the background, Satan. And here's God. It says his normal practice, like say for lunchtime, he would come. It says in the cool of the day. Well, usually lunchtime's the hottest part of the day. So in the evening, as the sun is setting, God would come, and here comes the glory. The glory has already left to them, but they knew God was coming. Here comes the fog. He says, Adam, God blood, son, aye, aye. He says, where are you? You know, because he was hiding. They ran. Just imagine huge jungle trees. And they're trying to hide from God, you know. It says they ran into the forest, they ran into the garden, and they tried to hide from God because they felt this terrible feeling that they've never felt in their whole life, which is fear. And he said, he comes out because God is his father. He comes out and he says, I heard your voice and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. And he says, my son, Adam, God blood. God, he says, who told you you were naked? Like, what is naked to you? What does that even mean? Why are you afraid? And he points at Eve and says, the woman you gave me, she gave me the fruit and I ate it. And so God says, what is this you've done? And she says, I was deceived by the serpent. The serpent beguiled me. That means he tricked me. He gave me false information, basically. And so our lesson that we learn from this is anything that anyone else says, if it's not from God, just go with what God says. Don't listen to any other creature, any other person. But this other creature lied to her, and no one's ever lied to her before. And so she got tricked easily because no one's ever lied in her life. And so she said, the snake tricked me. And so you know what God did? Just imagine the glory coming around that tree. And he said, he was mad at this creature, and he says, because of what you've done, because I guess they can see that snakes have joints all the way down their bodies. They used to have something there. Maybe it was legs, maybe it was wings. We don't know. But he said, from now on, you're going to crawl on your belly and eat the dust. And he says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. This is God declaring from the very beginning that he's going to send a savior, which is the seed of woman, which is Jesus. I will put enmity between your seed and her seed. You're going to bruise his heel, but he's going to crush your head. And so he's like, once God has declared something, it will come to pass. And so right here, God is putting an end to whatever his seed, which is, his children, the children of, it doesn't have to be just snakes. It means the spirit that has come into the snake will eventually have children that are going to do things against God's people, the people that obey God. And so he said, I'm going to put enmity between the two of you. And he's gonna crush your head eventually, like you're done. And then he addresses the woman, Eve. Well, her name wasn't Eve yet, it was just woman. He says, woman, the gift I've given you, because God gave two gifts. He gave the gift of the land to Adam to till it, and he gave the gift of the womb to give life, to have babies to the woman. And so he said, the gift I've given you is my presence is leaving you. That means that when you have your gift of having babies, it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. And then he comes to Adam and he says, son, when you till the land, it's not going to be easy anymore because my presence is leaving you. you have given your allegiance. You were the God of this world, and now Lucifer, the shining one, the one that you obeyed, is now the God of this world. So you're going to have it his way. My presence is leaving. That means thorns are going to be on branches now. The soil is going to be hard when you try to get something to grow from it. He said you're going to be sweating. It's going to be hard. And so they were sad, but you know what? God didn't take away their purpose. He still has them here on the earth, and he doesn't want them to be embarrassed and naked anymore. And so he actually had to kill an animal and take its fur and make clothing for them so that they weren't naked. And they were happy that God did this for them. And he told them, there's another tree in the garden called the tree of life. And whatever state you're in, because they had died inside their spirit man. They didn't die like physically, but inside of them, God was separated. That's what death means. Does anyone know what separation means? What does it mean, Hunter?
It means that, like, you won't see that again.
Yeah,
Yep,
it's like
you won't
this.
see that again.
Okay, this paper is in this thing, this clear thing, right? So this, I'm separating it. I'm taking it out. That's what happened when they listened to the snake and disobeyed God. A separation happened. That's what death is, when your spirit separates from your body. It's a separation. And so God's spirit had left, and because of that, there had to be a blood sacrifice. He said that there's no forgiveness of sin unless there's a shedding of blood. And so they were so sad because they care for animals, that they were the king and queen of the world, and the animals were like their subjects. They cared for them. And so an innocent animal had to die. So sad. And just because of that, to create them clothing. And this is so serious, you guys, because if Jesus didn't end up coming, the seed of woman, if Jesus never came, then eventually we will have to shed our blood and we'll be forever separated from God, forever. And so God said, there's another tree in the garden called the tree of life. And with you being separated, so his presence, everything good was gone from them. They were just like a glove with no hand in it, basically. They were dead inside. And he said, if they reach out and eat of the tree of life, they're going to live forever dead inside. And God stands outside of time, so he knows what people who are dead inside end up producing. Because they still have the gift of the womb. They can still till the land. But they're on the inside, they don't have the glory in them anymore. And so he said, if I'm going to put a big angel in front of the garden so that they can't get into the garden. So he banished them. They had to go away. They weren't in the garden, let's just say, because those animals were killed. We'll just say this is what it was like. And so they came out of the garden. There's another background in there that's just desert, but they had to go out of the garden, and there was a big angel with a sword, and he had to guard the tree of life so that no people, even their children eventually after they were born, would find it and reach out and eat it, because if they're dead inside, then they're gonna live forever without being able to enjoy anything, being full of pain and the actions that follow that. And so he banished them. And that's where we leave the story right now, because her name was just woman. That's what he called her. And so after that, she was named a new name, which he decided to change her name. And he named her Eve. Do you guys know her? Or you remember that her name was Eve? Hunter?
In the movie, Molly, there's, Eva.
Yeah.
Yeah, he goes, Eva.
Yeah.
And do you know what it means?
What's Eve mean?
Eve means the mother of all life.
Wow.
Yeah, because every person that is in the world, eventually, if we can trace back, our grandma had a mom, that grandma had a mom and dad, that grandma had a mom and dad. So all of them, if you go all the way back, Adam and Eve are our grandpa and our grandma, and we're like all a bunch of cousins. But everybody in the world was born from these two. And he was so impressed by her ability to, all of a sudden she grows, and then the time comes and she pushes really hard, and then out comes another little tiny human. It's amazing. And so he named her Eve, Mother of Life. And it's a beautiful thing.